October 1st, 1996, 3:17 p.m., Kensington Palace. Diana sat at her writing desk, fountain pen in hand, staring at the blank sheet of cream-colored stationery. Outside, autumn rain streaked the windows of her private sitting room, turning the palace gardens into a watercolor blur of gold and grey. She had started this letter 3 times already, each attempt crumpled and thrown into the fireplace. But this time would be different. This time, she would finish it. Because Diana knew something that no one else knew, not her sons, not her friends, not even her closest confidants. She knew she was going to die, not someday in the distant future, not in old age peacefully in her sleep, but soon, within a year, maybe less, and not by accident. Her hand trembled as she began to write, but her words were steady and clear. I am sitting here at my desk today in October, longing for someone to help me and encouraging me to keep strong and hold my head high. This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous. My husband is planning an accident in my car, brake failure and serious head injury, in order to make the path clear for him to marry. She paused, pen hovering over the paper. Once she wrote the next words, once she named names and made her suspicions concrete, there would be no taking them back. This letter would become evidence, testimony, a warning from beyond the grave. Diana took a deep breath and continued writing. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known as she poured her fears onto that page, was that this letter would survive her death by 10 months, that it would be kept hidden by the man she'd entrusted it to, locked away in a box marked most urgent for 7 years, that when it was finally revealed, it would ignite a firestorm of investigation and suspicion that continues to this day, and most importantly, that every word she wrote would prove to be prophetic. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, because to understand why Diana wrote this letter, why she was so certain that someone was planning to kill her, we have to go back to the moments when she first realized she was being watched, hunted, targeted by forces that couldn't allow her to remain free. Back to when Diana stopped being paranoid and started being right. June 15th, 1995, 11:47 p.m., Kensington Palace. Diana couldn't sleep. Again. She'd been having the same nightmare for weeks. Her car speeding through darkness. Brake failure. The terrible moment when she realized she couldn't stop. The impact. She woke gasping, drenched in sweat, her heart hammering. It was just a dream. Just stress and anxiety and the trauma of the divorce. That's what her therapist said. That's what everyone said. But Diana knew better. She got out of bed and walked through the darkened palace, past rooms full of priceless antiques and royal portraits, until she reached her private study. She unlocked a drawer and pulled out a folder marked Security Concerns. Inside were documents she'd been collecting for months. Notes about strange mechanical problems with her car. Brakes that sometimes felt spongy, a steering wheel that had mysteriously locked up twice, reports from her driver about men photographing her vehicle when it was parked, records of phone calls that clicked and echoed as if someone else was listening. Her staff thought she was paranoid. Charles's people certainly said so. They'd been whispering about her mental instability for years. Even her friends gently suggested she might be overreacting. But Diana had learned to trust her instincts. And her instincts were screaming that something was wrong. She picked up her phone and called Paul Burrell, her loyal butler. Despite the late hour, he answered immediately. Ma'am, Paul, I need to talk to someone. Someone outside the palace system. Someone who understands security. Do you know anyone? Paul was quiet for a moment. There's a former police officer. He does private security now. Very discreet. He worked on royal protection years ago, but left because he didn't like what he saw. Can you arrange a meeting? Of course. But ma'am, if you're concerned about your safety, perhaps we should involve official channels. No palace security, no police. This has to be completely private. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am. I'll arrange it. 3 days later, Diana met with Michael Brennan, a former Scotland Yard detective who now ran a private security firm. They met at a safe house in Chelsea, nowhere near any palace or royal property. Brennan listened as Diana explained her concerns. The mechanical problems, the surveillance, the feeling of being hunted. When she finished, Brennan didn't dismiss her fears. He didn't suggest therapy or medication or time away from stress. Instead, he said, "Your Royal Highness, I need to be frank with you. Everything you've described sounds like textbook pre-operational surveillance. Someone is watching you, someone is learning your patterns, and someone is testing vulnerabilities in your security." Diana felt her blood run cold. Who? That's the question. Could be foreign intelligence. You're a high-profile target. Could be criminals planning a kidnapping. Could be... He hesitated. Could be what? Could be people who have reasons to want you silenced. People with resources. People with access. You mean the palace? Brennan didn't confirm or deny. I mean people with institutional power and motivation. People who see you as a threat to something they want to protect. Diana felt the room spin. What do I do? Document everything. Keep records. Tell people you trust. Make sure that if something happens to you, there's evidence. Make sure people are asking questions. But won't that make me seem more paranoid? Ma'am, there's a difference between paranoia and justified fear. Paranoia is irrational. What you're describing is a rational response to a very real threat. Diana left that meeting with a terrible clarity. She wasn't imagining things. She wasn't crazy. She was in actual danger, and she needed to leave a record, evidence, a warning. August 17th, 1996, 2:34 p.m., Kensington Palace. The divorce was final. Diana was no longer Her Royal Highness. She'd lost her title, though she remained Princess of Wales. The settlement was generous, 17 million, and continued. Residence at Kensington Palace. Access to William and Harry whenever she wanted. But Diana understood what the palace saw this as. A severance package. A payoff to go away quietly and stop causing problems. She had no intention of going away quietly. That afternoon, she received a visitor. A man who introduced himself as Robert Fellows, her brother-in-law, married to her sister Jane, and also the Queen's private secretary. The conflict of interest had always bothered Diana, but never more than in this moment. "Diana, I need to speak with you about your future plans," Robert said, settling into a chair in her sitting room. "What about them? Your charitable work is admirable. We support it completely. But there are concerns about other activities, your relationships, your public statements. The palace feels that now that the divorce is final, it would be beneficial for everyone if you maintained a lower profile. You want me to disappear? We want you to be discreet. To remember that William and Harry are still part of the royal family, that your actions reflect on them." Diana felt anger rising. "My actions? What about Charles's actions? What about his very public relationship with Camilla? That's different. Because he's the heir and I'm just the discarded wife?" Robert's expression tightened. "Diana, please. I'm trying to help you. There are people in the palace who see you as a liability, who think you know too much, who worry about what you might say or do. The more you cooperate, the safer your position will be." Is that a threat? It's advice from someone who cares about you. After he left, Diana sat in silence for a long time. The more you cooperate, the safer your position will be. The message was clear. Be quiet and obedient or face consequences. That night, Diana called Paul Burrell. "I need to write something down. Something important. And I need you to keep it safe for me." "Of course, ma'am." "What is it?" "Insurance." October 1st, 1996, 3:17 p.m., Kensington Palace. We return to this moment. Diana at her writing desk. The letter taking shape beneath her fountain pen. She had been writing for 20 minutes now, her words flowing faster as the truth poured out. She wrote about the threats, veiled and otherwise, about the feeling of being watched constantly, about the mechanical problems with her car that no one seemed able to explain, about conversations she'd overheard, implications she'd picked up on, warnings she'd been given. And then she wrote the most explosive part, her belief about what would happen and why. "I have been battered, bruised and abused mentally by a system for 15 years now, but I feel no resentment, only sadness that the situation has had to come to this. I still believe once I'm out of the way, then things will be much easier for him and her." She paused, reading over what she'd written. It sounded paranoid. It sounded like the ravings of someone who'd lost touch with reality. But Diana knew in her bones, in her gut, with an absolute certainty that every word was true. She signed the letter, dated it, and sealed it in an envelope. Then she called Paul. "I need you to come to the palace privately. There's something I need to give you." An hour later, Paul stood in her sitting room as Diana handed him the sealed envelope. "This is very important, Paul. I need you to keep this somewhere completely secure. Not here at the palace. Somewhere only you can access. And if anything happens to me—" "Ma'am, please don't talk like that." "Paul, listen to me. If anything happens to me, if I die in a car accident or anything that looks suspicious, I need you to make sure this letter gets to the right people. To William, when he's old enough to understand. To journalists who will take it seriously. To anyone who will ask questions. Can you do that?" Paul's hands trembled as he took the envelope. "Nothing is going to happen to you. Promise me, Paul. Promise me you'll keep it safe." "I promise." Diana felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She'd done what she could. She'd left a record. If the worst happened, at least there would be evidence. At least someone would ask questions. She just hoped it would never be needed. March 14th, 1997, 10:23 p.m., Diana's car, London. Diana sat in the back of her Mercedes as her driver navigated through London traffic. She'd been to a charity event, one of dozens she attended each month. The work was exhausting but fulfilling, the only thing that gave her life meaning anymore. As they approached a roundabout, the driver pressed the brakes. Nothing happened. "Ma'am, we have a problem," he said, his voice tight with controlled panic. He pumped the brakes again. Still nothing. "What's wrong?" "The brakes aren't responding." Diana felt her heart stop. This was it. This was what she'd predicted. What she'd warned about. The driver downshifted rapidly, using the engine to slow the car. He pulled the emergency brake. The Mercedes shuddered and slowed, finally rolling to a stop on the side of the road. For a moment, no one spoke. Diana's hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. "Get the car towed," she said quietly, "and have an independent mechanic examine it. Not palace mechanics. Someone with no connection to the royal household." The mechanic's report came back 3 days later. Catastrophic brake line failure. Could have been caused by age and wear, though the car was relatively new. Could also have been deliberate. Diana added the report to her growing file of evidence. And she called Paul Burrell. "The letter I gave you. Make copies. Store them in different locations. If something happens, make sure everyone gets a copy, everyone." "Ma'am, you're frightening me." "Good, I'm frightened too. But at least now there's evidence. At least now people will have to ask questions." August 7th, 1997, 11:47 p.m., Kensington Palace. 3 weeks before her death, Diana had another conversation with a friend, this one recorded in her friend's diary, later shared with investigators. "I'm going to be killed," Diana said matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "They're going to make it look like an accident. Probably a car crash, but it won't be an accident. Diana, you can't know that." "I do know it. I've known it for over a year. I've written it down. I've told people, and when it happens, I want everyone to remember that I warned them." "What about William and Harry?" "Have you told them?" Diana's expression crumpled. "How can I? How do I tell my children that I think I'm going to be murdered? They're just boys. They shouldn't have to carry that fear." "Then maybe you're wrong. Maybe you're safe." Diana shook her head. "I'm not safe. I know too much. I've said too much. I'm too independent. They can't control me anymore. And people who can't be controlled become problems. And problems get solved." 24 days later, Diana was dead. August 31st, 1997, 12:23 am, Pont de l'Alma-Tunnel, Paris. The Mercedes S280 entered the tunnel at high speed. The crash was catastrophic. Dodi was killed instantly. The driver, Henri Paul, was killed instantly. Diana and her bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones were both critically injured. As first responders arrived, as cameras flashed and chaos erupted, Diana lay in the wreckage, barely conscious, whispering words no one would officially record. But her warning had been written, her prediction had been documented, and back in England, in Paul Burrell's home, locked in a box marked "Most Urgent" was a letter dated October 1st, 1996, 10 months before Diana's death. A letter that predicted in precise detail exactly how she would die. September 2003, London. Paul Burrell had kept Diana's secrets for 6 years after her death. The letter remained locked away, along with hundreds of other items Diana had entrusted to him for safekeeping. But then he was arrested, charged with theft for keeping Diana's belongings. The palace wanted everything back, every letter, every photograph, every piece of evidence Diana had collected. Burrell fought back. And in November 2003, during his trial, he revealed the existence of Diana's prophetic letter. The courtroom went silent as he described it. A letter written in October 1996, a letter predicting that Diana would be killed in a staged car accident to clear the path for Charles to remarry. The trial collapsed. The charges were dropped. And suddenly, Diana's paranoia didn't seem so paranoid anymore. The letter was published in the Daily Mirror. The world read Diana's own words, written in her own hand 10 months before her death. "My husband is planning an accident in my car. Brake failure and serious head injury." The reaction was explosive. Conspiracy theories that had been dismissed as fringe lunacy suddenly gained credibility. Official investigations were forced to reopen. Questions that had been swept aside demanded answers. Because Diana had known, she had predicted her own death. And she had been exactly right. 2004-2008, the inquest. Operation Paget, a 3-year investigation by British police, examined Diana's death in exhaustive detail. They interviewed hundreds of witnesses, reviewed thousands of documents, analyzed every piece of evidence. Their conclusion: Diana's death was an accident. The letter, while genuine, was written by a woman under extreme stress. Her fears, while understandable, were unfounded. But the inquest jury disagreed. In April 2008, after 6 months of testimony, the jury returned a verdict. Diana and Dodi were unlawfully killed by the grossly negligent driving of Henri, Paul, and the following paparazzi. Not murder, but not accident either. Something in between. And Diana's letter remained as evidence, indisputable proof that she had known something was coming, that her instincts had been right, that her fears had been justified. Today, Diana's prophetic letter is now part of the historical record. You can read it online. You can see her handwriting, her signature, the date, October 1st, 1996, 10 months before she died in a car crash. Experts debate its significance. Some say it proves Diana was murdered. Others say it's tragic coincidence that her fears, while understandable, created a self-fulfilling prophecy by making her more reckless, more desperate, more likely to take risks. But no one can explain how she predicted the exact method of death. The car accident, the head injury, the timing, unless she wasn't predicting at all, unless she was warning. And here's what they don't tell you. Diana wrote more than one letter. The famous one to Paul Burrell is the only one that became public. But Diana's lawyer, her therapist, her closest friends, they all received letters too. All of them contained the same warning, the same prediction, the same certainty that she would be killed in a staged accident. Some of those letters have never been released. They remain locked away, classified, protected by privacy laws and legal restrictions. What do they say? What other warnings did Diana give? What other evidence did she document? William and Harry know. They've read all the letters, all the warnings, all their mother's predictions. And those who know them say that the letters changed both princes forever, that they understood, finally, what their mother had been trying to tell them, what she'd been fighting against, why she'd seemed so desperate in those final years. She wasn't paranoid. She was right. The warning we didn't hear. Diana wrote her prophetic letter on October 1st, 1996. She was killed on August 31st, 1997. Between those dates, she gave the letter to Paul Burrell and told him, "I'm going to date this and I want you to keep it." She knew, she documented it. She tried to protect herself by making her fears public to trusted friends. It didn't save her, but it left a record, evidence, truth. And now, 26 years later, We can read her words and understand. Diana wasn't suffering from paranoid delusions. She was a woman who understood exactly what was happening to her, who saw the machinery moving against her, who knew what was coming and tried desperately to leave a warning. She wrote, "This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous." She was right. She wrote, "My husband is planning an accident in my car." 10 months later, she died in a car accident. Coincidence? Paranoia or prophecy? You decide. But remember this, Diana knew. She told people. She left evidence. And when it happened, exactly as she predicted, the palace called it an accident and moved on. Some warnings go unheeded until it's too late. Diana's was one of them. So here we stand at the end of this story, holding Diana's own words in our hands. A letter written in her handwriting, dated and signed, predicting her own death with devastating accuracy. Not a conspiracy theory from strangers, but a warning from Diana herself. What do you believe? Was Diana's letter a tragic premonition that somehow came true by coincidence? Or was it evidence that she knew what was being planned, that she tried to warn us, that her death was exactly what she feared it would be? Share your thoughts in the comments. This is where we honor Diana's courage in speaking her truth, in leaving a record, in refusing to die silently. If this story opened your eyes, please subscribe. There are more warnings Diana left behind. Letters, recordings, testimonies from people she confided in. Evidence that powerful forces have worked for decades to suppress. Together, we'll make sure every warning is finally heard. Together, we'll demand answers. Together, we'll never stop asking, what did Diana know? And why did she die exactly as she predicted?